Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. It's so great to have you here tonight. Also with us is my new friend, Mallery Jenna Robinson, looking
Hi.
here super fabulous in a fur coat, as you can see. We're going to bring her on in just a second, but I wanted to have a sec to introduce her. Mallery Jenna Robinson is an AfraCarribean Transwoman and Transgender and HIV healthcare advocate in Los Angeles. From 2019 to 2021, Mallery worked with the LGBT Center in Long Beach in their Transgender Health Department, actually helping to spin that department up. Responsible for case management of clients, linkage of care, PrEP and PEP services, STI screening, and HIV testing. While there, she implemented several successful essential programs such as Rack and Roll, a clothes closet. Get ready for all the great puns. This is awesome. Rack and Roll, Snack Shack, a food pantry, and Transport, an essential items delivery service, and such events as Come Out and Pose, ValenTrans Day, and the T-Report Red Desk Diaries, a panel for National Transgender HIV Testing Day. She has also presented several transgender empathy trainings, TET Talks, presentations to Sony PlayStation and Long Beach Vocal Rehab, to list a few. Mallery has also spoken publicly for the Long Beach Transgender Day of Remembrance at Harvey Milk Park in November of 2019, and for All Black Lives Matter, Los Angeles, and co-hosted several LGBT virtual award shows, such as Unique Women's Coalition Our Honors Award on Transgender Day of Visibility. Really long list of accomplishments,
I
and
know.
that's only about half of it. We'll get into the rest now.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Mallery.
Thank you. I love you, Emily. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. It's so great to have you here. It's wonderful to have two good friends of Lucky's, our good friend, right in a row. You follow Blossom as the, in line here, so it's great to have you on.
Thank you so much. It's a family affair.
It is indeed, and I can't wait till we get a chance to meet in person. That'll be great. Welcome in, chat. I'm sure everybody here knows the rules, but in case you don't, please ask all of your questions. Anything that you have for either myself or Mallery, particularly for Mallery would be best, but ask any questions or put in any comments. The mods will go ahead and grab those. I'm going to go through a set of questions here at the beginning to cover the elements of Mallery's transgender journey story, and then we'll take a break and come back and answer all of your questions. And I do mean all of your questions. So send anything that you'd like to know about either of us in, and we will absolutely get to them, as well as comments. I'll try to make sure that I pass your comments on to Mallery as well. There's Midvani in chat. I think she's head mod for tonight. Correct me if I am wrong, but we have several of the mods here. I'll let them let you know who to particularly pay attention to if you need to get a question through, or if something doesn't end up getting through somehow, because like I said, we will make sure to get through everything here.
Thank you, Emily.
So much to jump into, and let's start with the easy thing, the basic. How do you identify?
Yes, so you summed it up earlier. I identify as an Afra-Caribbean trans woman.
Great. With she, her pronouns, correct?
That is correct. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Awesome to get that out of the way. My favorite question to really kick things off with, how did you choose your name?
Oh my goodness. Okay. You know, and it's so rare that I ever get asked that question, but I shared it recently. So there was a girl, I was in the 4th grade. She was in the 6th grade. She was a cisgendered Black girl, and her name was Mallery Gay. And I know, right? And it was spelled with an O, and mine is Mallery. But I remember her coming up to me, Emily, on the playground, and she said, "I see you. I'm here for you, and keep being yourself." And so then fast forward to 2006, when I was thinking of my name, she immediately came up. And then my mom was like, "You know what? You should do it with an E, just to give it like a little uniqueness." And so that's how Mallery came to be. And then Jenna, my middle name, everyone says I have such a Jenna voice.
Okay.
So I just always like kind of took that on. And Robinson has always been my surname.
Okay. It's so beautiful that you're able to pay homage and tribute to the person that was essentially your first ally.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Very good. Thank you, Emily. That's exactly it.
Now, I know that you came out early. I mean, compared to me, most people do, but you came out at 16, correct?
Correct.
So you're in the middle of high school. What was that like for you? What was the process of coming out, and who did you come out to first?
Oh my goodness. So I can go back as early as 1995. I was 5 years old, and I remember telling my parents that summer that I was a little girl. And they were so supportive. They allowed me to grow out my hair. I go to school starting kindergarten, and the school was like, no, your child will come at male presenting. And so I had to, cut my hair and all of that. And then fast forward to about 11 years later in 2006, I just knew once I saw the Tyra Banks show, and I actually got to meet her last year, my role model, Isis King, who was just a huge inspiration for just, a visionary of gender firmness for me, for someone who has pursued gender affirming surgeries. And so all of that was very important for me in my journey. And I just really resonated with her. And so it was really easy for me to tell my very best friend, Carlin,
Mhm.
and his nickname Kay. And I just confided in him that I again felt these feelings from 1995. And in so many words, he asked me to go and speak to the guidance counselor, who then directed me to connect with my family again. And they were very supportive. And I've just been very fortunate to have a supportive family and a supportive high school as well.
Mhm. Yeah, well, you had some beautiful highlights there at high school. What were some of the things that this sounds weird coming out of my mouth, but they allowed you to do, or what were some of the things that happened that were super affirming for you during that time?
Oh my goodness. So, one of the things that I loved was that my high school classmates for our senior prom got me a date for prom. It was this guy, cisgendered white male, and he was homeschooled, and him and his girlfriend both were homeschooled and ultimately needed to dates for prom. And so myself and another classmate served as their dates, but I got to actually have that full on prom experience with him. Like, he came and picked me up, like he met my mom, he got me like a whole like flower, and we took pictures together. It was so beautiful. Like, and when I did my whole like senior escort across the aisle, like they called his name and my name. And so it was so beautiful because there were other like, like cisgendered girls that they could have actually asked for him to be escorted with, but they asked me. And so I'm always incredibly humble for that. And then, of course, my high school allowed me to take my senior pictures as female presenting. And I was also allowed to dress as female presenting from 2006 throughout my remaining of high school years until 2008 when I graduated.
Wow. So that's like 2.5 years, basically.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Got a question. Well, got a couple questions coming in already. One from Shy, and I'm going to ask it now because it's incredibly pertinent to what we're talking about. Were
Okay.
your parents? What was your parents' level of response and reaction to that initial school when you went to kindergarten that you had to cut your hair and come presenting as a boy? Well, how did they react?
They my parents were teenagers when they had me, so I think they felt very, young black couple, really trying to confide into a southern, very monolithic white school system. They just didn't want to make any trouble,
Mm,
and so they just, I think for them, there was what we kind of call that black suppression, which is big in response becomes like an internal anger, and
mm,
so a lot of times it's just we don't talk about it, right? But the anger and the frustration is there, and that was pretty much the sentiments
wow.
from that point on until 2006. And then once I said I will not go in the closet anymore, they said, "Well, you will not go back in the closet as well, and we stand with you."
Wow, that's amazing. So your family did believe that race was involved in that?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Again, I was born and raised in Montgomery, Alabama. And though it has, become more of a predominantly, African American community at that time in the early 90s, it was definitely still very much heavily, Eurocentric and Caucasian based. So they definitely believe that that played a role in it. And just, of course,
Yeah.
I think also just social demographics of age and poverty, and not really wanting to make trouble in that setting, especially with a child who would have been considered very different,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. If you've already got a bit of a target on you, it seems like, yeah, to add to that, that's unfortunate. You're getting a lot of love in the chat and applause for your strength.
I love you.
When you did finally come out in high school, were you in a different state?
I was in Montgomery, Alabama still.
Okay.
This was the George W. Bush era. Again, like I said, this is like 5 years into 9/11. So there was a lot of, heavy, like encouraging the youth to go into the army and fight. And so, I was one of those that wasn't me. But I was, also at a magnet school. So I had to have a 4.0 or higher GPA to stay at that school. Incredibly amazing high school. Thank you for my experience. And so I think also that helped with the type of experience that I had, with the type of classmates that I had as well. So I always believe in timing and serendipity and fate. And, I don't know what my experience would have been like if I would have been at an, traditional public school. It could have been different, but I know I was at a very safe, magnet-based school with students who were very open.
Interesting. Okay. So you came out, you come out to a community, to a support system, basically, that everybody is behind you, at least outwardly.
Yeah.
When did you first seek to try and find other trans folks, to a community of other trans people that were had similar experiences, and what was your experience there?
Honestly, Emily, there really was no other trans resource. Not until I turned 18, my first exposure to really that gender expansive community really stemmed from my first, queer space, queer club, and seeing the performers, and some of them identified as trans women,
Hmm.
and so seeing their essence, and their beauty, and it was just such a state for me of wanting to get to myself in terms of visibility and just where I wanted to be physically in my life and in my journey. So I
Yeah.
definitely resonated with them in that regard, but certainly in terms of developing friendships, that came more in my college years when I created the first LGBTQ club at Jacksonville University. And it was called LGBTQSA. And so we actually had several trans youth who were there along with myself. And it was really great to get to meet them and build that community. And we're still friends to this day.
this this girl, I swear. So, a lot of people, I ask that question because a lot of people have a false start when they go to try and join a community, and sometimes it sets them back. You go to find community because you're like, I think I might be, and you're trying to find more information, and for whatever reason, the group doesn't resonate with you. You're not welcomed because you aren't trans enough or whatever. And so I love that you just jumped over all that and just started your own thing and made it for others. That's incredible.
That was me. And then back to just really quickly, it's interesting that you mentioned my high school classmates again. Thank you, class of 2008, gave me the nomination for most friendly. So I think that's why it's always been so easy for me to jump into different spaces and just connect with people, because I just see people as human beings, and we all deserve to be treated with kindness and respect.
Well, yeah, I think that goes a long way, right? If you're already if you're already comfortable enough with yourself because you've lived it your entire life, and there was no real coming out. It was just like, I'm ready to live it as me for now. And if you're that confident and able to be friendly and everything, and you've been kind of exhibiting the traits apparently, so I feel like maybe it wasn't a big shock for everyone, and it was easy because again, like they all seemed to know you. That's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Now you were telling me that one of the things that you talk about yourself is that you've basically gone through everything as far as surgeries and the full trans experience, if you want to, check off everything on the menu there. When did you know the extent that you wanted to go through with all of that? And as you went through your journey, did your goals shift in any way?
When I heard of Isis's story of having gender reassignment surgery, gender affirming surgery, for me, that was that, again, additional click of, yes, I want every aspect of how I feel internally to match externally. And it took years, I began in 2006, April 28th, and I actually did not begin my medical transition until 2011 when I was diagnosed with HIV. And so that was when I got linked into ART, antiretroviral care, and then also my HRT. And that began that journey. And then finally, I was able to have my first surgery in 2012, which was my breast augmentation. And then I had my gender reassignment surgery in Miami, Florida in 2016. I was engaged at the time to my now ex-husband. And then I had body contouring surgery a couple of years ago in 2020. And that includes the tummy tuck, and that includes the butt lift and all of that. So, and I had that done here in Los Angeles.
Okay.
So those are the three surgeries that I have, and I feel so complete in my journey and in my skin. And for me, that's just what's the most important, is that when I truly open my eyes, everything that I've seen inside from the moment I knew who I was now matches everything that I am now and who I am.
That's beautiful. And I don't mean to put you on the spot here in any way, but I know a big thing a big thing that is a major topic in the trans experience is passing culture and the pressure to pass. Now, I think it's so prominent because it's something we all sort of have ingrained. That's what our goal is, just from the start, is we just want to blend in as women. For so many of us, it's not a possibility. As someone who works a lot in trans healthcare, who has gone through the surgeries and let's put it out there, blends in as a woman pretty perfectly. What do you say to some of those folks out there that maybe possibly don't have the money to do the surgeries, or what is sort of your take on that passing culture?
Oh, it is such a culture. I mean, and everything that we do, from ballroom to, female impersonation, that passing culture is there. And it's one of those things that I think it's just a level of saying that you have truly fit in with society, quote unquote. But that is not what is important. And that is one of the things that I've learned. Um, One of the things that I tell people is that I've never had facial feminization surgery. The hormones just naturally, but that also my weight shifted and things of that nature. And so people fit into their skin the way they're supposed to when they're supposed to. And I don't think that whether, you pass or whether you don't makes you any less trans. I think it just makes you any more, for me, in my case, more ability to be an ally, because I have an opportunity for someone who can then possibly go into these spaces, where maybe passing would be more, acceptable, and I can be a voice and continue to say this is what my community needs as a trans person who just happens to have that passing privilege. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I also try to flip it into different ways that, yes, even those who pass, let's also do our responsibility. Because sometimes I know, some of us will do it. We will pass and then we will say it's no longer a problem.
Yeah.
We've done the work. We're going to just go and live our own lives. But no, for me, that's not the case. We must continue to be there for our community, whether we pass or whether we don't, because we all are affected by the violence, the poverty, the unemployment, the lack of education.
Well, and pulling back on that a little bit, if any part of that question was unfair, you did reach that level of self-acceptance and all of that before you started down the path of surgeries, correct? Is that safe to say?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I was okay from 2006 to 2011 not having hormones, not having any access to HRT or medical hormones. Back in the day, it was, get some of your friends' birth control. Those were kind of the things that you would do. And so, even then, I still didn't have access to those types of, medical regimens. So it was really just patience and just believing that everything would work itself out. And of course, that did come in the response of me becoming HIV positive. But also with that, it allowed me to get connected to a primary care who also realized that I was someone who would, definitely be beneficial from medical treatment. And that was in the form of estrogen. And I haven't looked back ever since. And so for the past 11 years, I'm probably to say that I've been in my medical journey, not only with my, hormones, but also with, just my antiretroviral medicines. It's been really great to just see myself continue to in my sister's name, blossom.
I love the callback. That's great. So did you have any hurdles or anything from the medical field as you started to move into your medical side of your transition, or was it fairly smooth for you?
I will admit I have had some medical, and I actually am getting ready to have some revisions done to my gender reassignment surgery here in Los Angeles. So I'm excited about that. I actually had like a similar interview like this with the surgeon who's going to be doing my surgery, Dr. Yuan in Pasadena. And we're talking about like, post-operative healthcare and the complications and even some of the side effects and things of that nature. I know, for example, when I first had my breast augmentation in 2012, I developed hypertension, high blood pressure. And that has been something that I've just learned to navigate for the past 10 years. And, I navigate that well. And of course, some people are aware of in 2021 and last year, I had developed a pulmonary embolism for my body contouring surgery. And I had to be on blood thinners for
Yeah.
6 months, but I continue to thrive and survive, and I'm here. But that does not mean I regret going through my surgeries because I am here and I am very proud of where I'm at. And, that's just part of certain people's journeys, and that's mine. Some people will never experience that, and I hope they don't. But for me, that's part of my journey, but it's also part of why I'm still here to talk about it.
Hmm. What forms of dysphoria did you deal with? And sort of when was the last time that you had to deal with that? Has it been a while for you?
It never, I think, really goes away. I think you're always wanting to be the best you can be in every way. And so there's always that dysphoria of like, am I where I want to be financially? Am I where I want to be visible in terms of, how I look, how I present? All of those things I think come into question as we become adults and older adults. And I'm 32 now. So I'm always a little dysphoric and like, am I where I want to be in my life and my identity in that regard? But definitely, I do have my moments where I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling it today. And it's a reality that, I still sit with, but I also know at the end of the day, I know I'm a woman. I know who I am.
Mhm.
So whether I am glammed or whether I have on my silk scarf going to Ralph's, I am a woman. And so whether I'm dysphoric or whether I feel euphoric, I still know at the core of who I am a woman.
Mhm.
And that never goes away. And that just keeps me going.
We talked a bit during Blossom's show about the intersectionality of having a trans identity as well as having a Black identity at the same time, and the various things that she had to go through and experience. Did you have some struggles with that, where those two different identities kind of clashed, and the trans community apparently hasn't been very generally good about people of color, and people, the Black community has not been really typically good about the trans community. How have those two identities intersected for your personal experience?
They intersect a lot. I come from a family of, activists. My grandfather, maternal grandfather, is a member of the Black Panther. My paternal grandfather fought in Vietnam. My maternal grandmother picked cotton in the fields of Tuskegee, Alabama. So I have all of these historical roots, and then I also have four brothers, cisgender black males. So you have where a lot of the violence that has happened to trans women, especially trans women of color, have come from cisgender men of color, especially black cisgender men. So right, I have that there, and then also just being a black trans woman and knowing that the statistics of being a victim myself, and then also the police violence that my brothers can face. So there's so many different things when we think about like race and gender identity and how that fits into being from the South, being Haitian, all of these things. What does that culturally look like? And um, at the end of the day, it goes back to just what I mentioned earlier about just knowing who you are and just knowing the type of people that you have in your life. I know that the type of family that I come from, yes, I have four cisgendered male brothers who, some of them may present what would be threatening or gangster, whatever the society may want to term it, but they would never put their hands on a trans person ever because they have a sister,
Yeah.
And so it's those things that I can sit with and be like, yes, there's all these intersectionalities that affect me as a black trans woman, but I also know the coreness of who I am and who the people that I love are, and I just know that we represent goodness and kindness, and that's what we continue to resonate around us, and that's why I'm here with you today.
I'm tempted to ask a question, but I'm not sure.
Ask it. Come on, girl.
Okay. Because we've got a fair bit of love going between each other, so I think I can feel tepidly comfortable. Do you have any experience into which identity is more typically in danger? The cis black male, like especially one who might, as you say, like present a little bit tougher, a little bit rougher around the edges, versus a black trans woman who might, blend in typically, but then in certain situations it can be in more danger. Do you have any comment on that?
Oh, they both are endangered species,
Mm-hmm.
Emily. Let's just be honest. The world would be fine if both killed each other, were killed. So, it's hard to say which one is more impacted. I know, and I have a true crime podcast where I talk about this. It is the blunt truth, and it is one of those things that I have had to, in my own nuclear bubble of acceptance in a family that I grew up in, realizing that that is not everyone's experience. And so it is heartbreaking, but yeah, both are very impactful. Um, and it's really heartbreaking because I fear for my brothers. I fear for my, you always think of, you see these cases. Just recently, a case of a black cis man getting murdered, getting shot, and I'm always just worried for my mother with, my brother, my youngest brother who's going on 15, and then, my oldest brother who's going on 33. And so, there's just this wide range of where either of them can be targets, and then of course just myself being a black trans woman and having to worry about that. And so there's so much in. I would say, yeah, we're both endangered species. We're both definitely at the top of the most vulnerable.
Yeah, your poor mom.
Mm. And you talk about the strength of the black woman, the black mother,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, and a single mother. So yeah.
Hmm. You mentioned when you started HRT, that was when you were diagnosed positive with HIV.
Correct.
And you told me last night in our pre-interview that you're pretty open to talking about that, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you know how you contracted it?
Yes. So I was in a monogamous relationship with this cisgendered guy. He was a friend of one of my brothers, and I was, monogamous to him, but we were also, not using any form of protection. And one day, it was around early May of 2011. I was 21. I was working on my double bachelor's, and I passed out at work. And the next thing I know, I've been rushed to the emergency room. And then they did some blood work. And I get the results a couple of weeks later to come back to the Montgomery County Health Department. They ultimately tell me that I'm HIV positive. I then have to go to the Copeland Care Clinic, which is where I met my lovely Dr. Bat. And he was the one who then got me onto my initial antiretroviral, which was Complera. And then I was on that before it was recalled. And then ultimately also got linked into my estrogen or estradiol.
Hmm.
And I've taken the oral tablets. And ever since then, I have remained undetectable and thriving on my hormones.
That's wonderful. Usually on this show we talk about sort of like when did you learn that you were trans and how did you come to accept that? Because for a lot of us, there is a kind of a big hurdle there in getting over that. That part was easy for you. You have been in a monogamous relationship. With the except of the protection and I'll speak for myself. I've been in monogamous relationships where it's just like, yeah, we're safe. I trust, blah blah blah. Um,
Yeah.
Walk me through what your mental state and my mental process was at that time. Did you have a lot of trust issues with your partner at that time? What were some of the conversations you had to have, and how did you get through that period?
Oh, I was so enraged, Emily. I couldn't believe that someone who I trusted my body to, someone I trusted my heart to, was just so careless. And I mean, there was these red flags when you look back at life and you think of like the things that we do, and you can kind of see, like, oh, I should have saw this because there was this, and so like he already had two children by two different women, um, and so excuse me, that was just a huge indicator right there that fidelity was not necessarily maybe on his to-do list. But of course, I was a young trans woman, was kind of one of my first really adult relationships, so I thought I knew what I was doing. I
Mhm.
thought he loved me, and I thought by giving him what he wanted, which was him unprotected inside, I thought that's what he wanted, and that would make him love me and stay. But it just ultimately still led to him, sleeping with other people, and then ultimately contracting HIV himself, and then passing it to me. And we didn't really talk much about it. After that, he kind of pulled the typical guy move when they don't want to deal with confrontation. They just get ghosts and they just, skedaddle and you can't get a hold of them. So
Mhm.
it was a lot of that for a few years on and off. And then most recently, last year, he reached out and I had heard that he had experienced some violence in his life that resulted in a shooting, him being shot. And so I always thought like, okay, if I had an opportunity to speak to him, I would want that. So when he reached out, of course I expressed my sympathies for his trauma, but I also wanted to let him know the trauma that he caused me back in 2011. And it was really, powerful, Emily, because, for the first time, I think he really realized that his actions hurt me. And
Mhm.
I had to learn how to navigate a new normal. I had to learn how to reframe myself from looking at this pill as my only way of surviving. And I had to say, this is my multivitamin,
Mhm.
and so again, just trying to continue to keep everything glass half full while going through college and, wanting to pursue a teaching career at that time. It was also important for me to just maintain a type of mentality. As you know, again, it was so easy to look at it as a death sentence. But
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm not going to look at it that way. I'm going to continue to survive. And I let him know that's exactly what I did, despite never really talking to him about it until most recently.
And what did that moment do for you? That chance to finally express how you were hurt and what it meant to you.
Oh, it felt so good because I felt like, he finally knows that his actions hurt me. I think, it's so easy sometimes when we're young like that, when we're 20, 21, 19. And we can say, oh, we were young and dumb, quote unquote, and I was careless and reckless. And yes, all those things are true. But when it does affect someone else's life in such a way that, it could have led to trigger warning, self harming, it could have led to so many other things that I could have, as a Black trans woman, feeling like I didn't even have resources or access at Montgomery, Alabama, of all places.
Mm-hmm.
I could have gave up and gave in, but I didn't. And for me to be able to tell him that, and for him to really receive that, because he had to really stay on that phone. He had to really sit there and hear that. And that to me said that he was in a place of really to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that was because he had a near death experience of his own, in addition to already being HIV positive. But then I think also just realizing that, my actions have led to me hurting others, and I need to really receive this. And so, again, it was a beautiful moment. It was a healing moment. And I am truly in a place of just growth from this.
That's amazing. You mentioned having an ex-husband that I'm sure was after that time period. How much
Yes.
did this experience, how much did it damage your trust in others, and how did you repair that? Find a way to kind of repair that that lack of trust in others to put that faith in someone new.
That's a good question. I've always, seen the good in people, or as my therapist say, you have these rose colored glasses, Mallory. I like to just, see just a world of, land of happiness and opportunity. And so despite the hurt that my ex had caused me in 2011 and receiving an HIV diagnosis, I knew it was important for me to make sure that I always communicated that with any partner. And so I graduated college in 2014 with my double BA in biology and history. And then I moved to Florida, where I began teaching middle school science and history, which is where I met my now ex-husband. And he too was an educator. He was in the Navy. He just really led me to believe that he accepted my identity as a Black woman, right? Because he was identified as a cis white man. So that was already a place of privilege for him.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from a family of privilege as well. So there was already that kind of social, racial, hierarchy there. But he always really provided that sense of ease into that. It was really beautiful. We got engaged in 2016, a couple of months after I had my gender reassignment surgery. He was there with me when I had my gender reassignment surgery in 2015. We navigated sex safely. We got tested. So he always, knew that he was negative, and I always made sure that we got tested together regularly, especially as I got to a point in my healthcare journey where I was able to go and have my labs done every 6 months. So we navigated that fairly fine. But then, of course, really the issue became more for our relationship was once I had my gender reassignment surgery. And that was, kind of where you talk about really finding your community as a trans person, because once you become post-op, things are so different for you. And in so many ways, you are viewed differently. And so I think for him, being with me when I was identified as a pre-op woman, and then going into a marriage and a relationship with me as a post-op woman, it just proved to have its challenges. And it just became a very unhealthy and toxic relationship. And I decided to choose me. And I ultimately realized it was best for me to get out of that relationship. And I filed for divorce in 2019. We got married in 2017, and I filed for divorce in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And we were actually legally divorced right before COVID hit. So I was able to get mostly everything done. And I even got to keep my USAA and Navy Federal too. Woo woo. So it's all those things. And I did all of that in the middle of teaching my beautiful, amazing youth back in Florida. And but that was, I'm so thankful for that experience of being able to experience love in that way, of being able to get legally married, being proposed to, being walked down the aisle by my dad. All of those moments, I still have the photographs. I still am very close to some of my in-laws, including his parents and sisters. So it's still a very beautiful experience.
And I'm sorry, I may have missed. Were you able to maintain a kind of friendly relationship, you and your ex?
Emily, I love you. No,
Okay.
unfortunately, we did not. Yeah, when I'm going to be very quick. He wanted an open marriage. I did not.
Oh.
It just wasn't for me. And ultimately, I think that just always rubbed him the wrong way that I chose me and decided to get
Mhm.
out the marriage. And one of the things that he stated, and I tell anyone, don't you ever let anyone say things like this to you because you are worth more. He told me that I was just someone that was just worth sex and not love.
Okay.
And I am here to prove that you are more than that, and you're beautiful and worthy of a beautiful life. Never let anyone tell you different.
So that was the toxic aspect. That's about the worst that you can be. Having someone devalue your worth.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But now I'm here, and I'm still paying it forward and working with the community. And that's why I said, despite the issues that I've had in my life, getting HIV and not getting that closure at that time, and then the
Mhm.
trauma I went through in my marriage and divorce and moving to LA and getting into advocacy work, it all, had to be part of this stepping stone, this greater journey to get me here to be here with you. And again, that's part of where I think about serendipity and fate. And I had to go through that to get here.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a question we'll definitely get to in a minute, once we get through a few more of these. But that's, what do you feel like you've been able to accomplish because of your transition? Before we get there, though, we're talking about dating again. Talking about some interesting intersectionalities of identities. Um, I as someone who was just recently trying to kind of start dating and was very timid to enter a cis dating pool because of the being pre-op, how did you navigate that? What were some of the keys to that? Or did you just present yourself and then have the conversation, and if they weren't cool with it, then bye?
The latter. For me, it was more of, I know, for in terms of if the partner would know that I was pre-op. I wanted to make sure, because for me, I was very dysphoric that way. I just did not acknowledge my genitalia, my frontal, and so it was very important for me to be with a partner sexually who would also disengage with that. So that was always a key aspect for me, and just really navigating the type of relationship I would have with a cis male partner,
Hmm.
just because I know of what I would prefer. So that was a huge preference for me. But then also just understanding that I wasn't going to be a fetish,
Hmm.
and making sure that that aspect was really that boundary. That's where we as people have to say, no, 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 no. I am worthy. I do have value, and I choose me. And so, and that takes time. We grow and we learn on that. But those are the ways that I've navigated in those spaces.
Hmm. And do you feel that being openly pre-op trans greatly reduced your options for dating, or were you able to find a decent amount of people to have first dates with, and kind of that initial interaction to get to the point of determining if there's chemistry? Because I feel like a lot of times we're timid and we feel like, well, no one's going to accept us, no one's going to want to date us, and so I don't want to put myself out on a dating app trying to look for cis folks because that constant rejection, I can't take that.
And that's a very common fear, and it's a very realistic fear. Each of my partners, the partner that who gave me HIV, he was a cis male. I knew him through my brother, so he knew me prior to even beginning my gender journey, and then after. So we had that prior history when we began dating. And then the partners that I did have serious relationships with, and when I say serious, I mean like they got me cars and introduced me to mama and everything. What I mean? Then in the South, honey, every boy ain't taking you to meet mama. So, these relationships were, maybe a year or more. And then, of course, my ex husband too, who married me legally and openly, and so love exists. You just have to know your boundaries in those relationships, especially as trans folks, especially as gender expansive folks, because when we are already right seeking to love ourselves, And then we're trying to seek love from someone else because, one of the things that people always say, the key to happiness is to love and to be loved. So, right, so we know that we have the love to give, but who's going to give it to us? So then when we do get that love, or what we think it is, right, based on what society has shown us, and some of that can be even what we grew up seeing, that toxicity in family structures. And so for me, I know for a fact the fact that my parents weren't together, and the fact that, I know that my dad, is a little rough around the edges. He's an old school kind of Ice Cube 80s, hard knock what you think of. And so I know that was kind of the type of guys that I went for, that, whether they were identified as white ethnically or black or Latin, they always kind of had that bad boy edge. And so they would give me that limerence and that lovey-dovey kissy kiss, like Chris Brown's song. But then within 6 months, that toxic masculinity where they would want to be, and then they would want to remind you that you're trans. And, and if, of course, if the racial relationship is different, they remind you of your ethnicity. So the power dynamic definitely is always there. And so you just have to remember to be affirmed in who you are and your worth, and be like, okay, I am black, I am trans, I am femme, but that's not going to give you the right to treat me any kind of way, handle me any kind of way, control me, or anything else.
So with that experience, what is your advice? What was your method for remaining safe in dating as a trans person? Because, on one hand, you put it out there right in your dating profile, or right in talking to people that I don't know. I guess I'm assuming online dating. I'm probably thinking too modern terms. But like I'm just kind of thinking in terms of modern term, in the modern situation where you would be looking on a dating app and you put out there that you're trans, that'll filter out a lot of the bad people. People don't want it, whatever. But then I see a potential for people who want to do harm to trans people responding and putting on airs. What was your experience with the dating from a safety perspective? When do you tell somebody that you're trans? What is the situation you try to make sure that you're in when you do that, to make sure that you're as safe as possible?
For me, and again, it's been 16 years, and, to navigate from the age of 16 to now 32 safely. And when I say safely, I have not been a victim of any type of violence, in that regard. There was one dating incident in 2010, Emily, where I was hanging out with my cousin, and she had this guy that she was dating, and his friend was there. And his friend just, wanted to go and talk. And I just thought we were going to talk. And we went downstairs to, talk in his car. And next thing I know, he gets a phone call, and it's his friend who was still upstairs with my cousin, and disclosed that I was trans. And he was like, "Oh, I'm driving the car," and I got it just a little scary. And one of the things he had said to me, he wanted me to perform a sex act, and he's told me that he had a weapon, a gun, that he would have used it. And that was the only time in terms of that kind of situation that I experienced. I did experience dating violence. My very first relationship in high school, and so I navigated through that for a year and a half, as well as also in my marriage. So I've learned how to be someone who doesn't allow the abuse, the trauma, to take hold of me. If anything, I've learned how to just become empowered and continue to want to make sure that the community that I serve, which is the entire trans community, has accessibility, visibility, and equity.
Circling back on dating one more time, we've got one more thing to talk about there.
Let's do it.
What was your method for talking about HIV?
It's interesting. That one was always a little more sensitive for me to really disclose. And it was always more so just because, almost with the trans identity, there's still that stigma. But with HIV, it is just, I mean, and I am learning, living here in the West Coast now, the terminology, like, excuse my language, like clean and dirty. Like, I had never heard things like that in reference to if someone's positive or negative. And it's heartbreaking to know that these things can be discussed about our community. And so all of those things sometimes makes you hesitant because, people are just, sometimes not kind and they look for reasons to be violent and justifications. And so by not disclosing your gender identity or disclosing your HIV status, all of those things put you in a greater risk of being targeted, and of course that factors in your willingness to disclose too, because of your fear of being attacked and harmed. But I still always know, especially if it's going to be now if it's a, casual partner, safe sex, if it's a lifelong partner, or the time I thought it was my permanent person, or, but unfortunately they weren't. But, of course, in time we would then, practice, unprotected sex. And of course, they knew I was on my medicines and all of that. So I was always able to navigate those relationships safely. But certainly it was always hard to still have those conversations with them. They always thanked me for having them, but it was always still more difficult than disclosing that I was trans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would assume that would be that would be a bigger barrier for connection with somebody than the fact that you're trans. I think people are more likely to be able to overlook that, but that's just my personal privileged experience.
Yes, absolutely.
So, how did being HIV positive affect your medical transition?
Well, you have to do so many more additional layers and hurdles of medical care. You have to go and have additional blood work done, which states that you're undetectable. You have to get letters from hematologists and just so many different additional steps that you have to do. But, again, if you're undetectable, it's fairly simple because, your blood work is going to remain the same. It's going to remain undetectable, which is really what most surgeons and primary care physicians and, specialists look for. They just want to know that your blood work and your lab work is undetectable. And so all of that is pivotal in how soon you can have your surgeries because let's say if you get out of care, and then now your viral load is, a little high. And so now you're no longer undetectable. Now you have to worry about a potential mutation.
Mm-hmm.
And these are things that are really real. And I know for myself personally, I am not a fan of taking pills. Okay. And they do have like these, new injections called Capnuva that they're, opening up to the community. And I'm even looking into that myself. But again, it's really about the way that we frame. And even if you're, someone who doesn't like to take a pill and it can get exhausting, just look at it as taking your multivitamin.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at it as just, make it, it's something that's just keeping you just 100% okay. And so that way there's never any troubles, especially for those who do want to have surgeries, if that's something that you want to proceed with. All of those things are so pivotal in making sure that your viral load is undetectable.
Mm-hmm. So, how has being HIV positive and your experiences helped and changed your experience with working with the trans community? Has it? I'm assuming that it has made you a great asset to a lot of the communities and the health services around because of that experience.
Yes, it really has been such a beautiful way to connect with the community from, again, my experience with the center in Long Beach to working at the AIDS Projects of Los Angeles, to also now working as the Community Advisory Board Coordinator at We Can Stop STDs LA. All of these roles, with being a trans woman of color who lives with HIV for now almost 11 years, that lived experience is something that I can speak on. But then navigating through that, because again, like I mentioned, I wasn't always a fan of taking pills. So I certainly had my moments where, I wasn't always the best with care, especially early on. Again, when you're younger, you do feel invincible. And when you're told you're undetectable, sometimes it's easy to just be like, okay, I'm okay for a while. I can miss a few. But that's where, you have to continue to tell yourself, no, that you're not, that's not the reality. And so And that comes with maturity, that comes with age and wisdom, and just realizing where you want to be in your healthcare journey. But all of that has been so important, and just how I have navigated my HIV journey and how I speak about that to the community and how I work along other members who are HIV positive or those who are doing HIV healthcare work and studies. All of it is so important in how it just connects, because we're really all here just trying to make sure that every community, is reduced to being exposed to HIV.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm reminded of a comment I wanted to make earlier when you were talking about, because you just mentioned the word reduced, that in talking about dealing with people and talking about your identities and sort of, there's a lot of danger in there, and there's also the regular danger of just being reduced down to something like that, where, like you said, being called either clean or dirty, reduced to just such a small little fragment of who you really are. And it's beautiful that you've been able to rise above that and be proud about who you are, and use that to then educate others and help others through their journey. Because I got to imagine that, I mean, being trans, I know firsthand, is rough. Being HIV positive in the midst of that has to be one of the most difficult things to navigate. And it's wonderful that you're able to have that experience and help them directly with that personal knowledge of exactly what they're going through, and what they need to do and the things they need to focus on. Like, you need to take your pills. It's important to make sure, and here are some tools to do that.
Well, and to add back to what you mentioned earlier about how, for those who maybe don't have access to healthcare in certain states, there's a video on my social media. I created like this whole video about a toolkit. And one of the things that, let's say if you are living in a state like Alabama, where I was born and raised, where there's not really a lot of gender affirming healthcare like here in California, then, if you don't have access to an electrolysis, right, that facial hair removal process, there's razors that you can use that can really help reduce razor bumps. There's at-home regimens, that are really cost-effective, like using facial soft soap, hand soap, to lather, as opposed to, using shaving gel, using rub and alcohol as opposed to shaving, ointments and creams after you've shaved. So all of those things are just, things that you can get from the dollar store, and really just keep your skin smooth, and keep you that visibility that way, if that's the aesthetic that you're going for. So again, so I have that video again talking about ways to still be affirmed in your journey, even if you don't necessarily have access to affirming healthcare.
I love that. That sounds crucial. I can't wait to get that. We'll have to get that link from you afterwards, and
Okay.
drop it in our Discord server somewhere. I
Okay.
think that would be really helpful for a lot of people, this girl included.
Okay. Thank you, Emily.
I think I've gone through all of the additional questions that I wanted to ask. Let's go ahead and hit the last three that we have in our main set. We'll take our break and then come back and talk about all of the things that you've been doing for the community and anything that you would like to promote. We have to dive very deep into your podcast, because that's incredible and very interesting. So, what are the things that you feel you've been able to accomplish because of your transition?
Wow. Oh my goodness. Anything I put my mind to. The moment I knew I was Mallery Jenna Robinson, I knew how I wanted to express. I knew how I wanted to identify. I knew I always wanted to work with my community. And I knew that my life was going to somehow land in Los Angeles, California.
Hmm.
It really is about manifesting. Life is what you make it. And despite everything, and Emily, I mean everything, I have went through, I was determined to get here to this place. And I always maintained humility, kindness, gratitude, because there were people along the way, though I was shown cruelty. There were people that in the midst of that showed me so much kindness. Shout out to you, Mama D. And all of that, impacted my ability to continue to show kindness and empathy to others
Yeah.
and pass it forward. And that's the beauty of life, is not letting those hurdles, those traumas, bring you down to a place to their level of retribution and revenge and, wanting to just hurt others because, baby, go live your best life because it's out there. Just keep believing in yourself.
And have you been able to maintain? I'm so excited. Have you been able to maintain that throughout your life, or did you go through periods of struggle where you were beaten down and you did have trouble trusting people and you were angry and felt defeated?
Oh yes. Oh my goodness. Just recently, a couple of posts. One of my TikTok videos. I really had this heart wrenching, just really gut wrenching moment on TikTok where I just talked about the experience of being Black and trans, and from being seen as fun, sexually being made fun of, according to certain comedians, and then also just being, seen as that we're fooling people. So I really spoke about that for a minute, and it, has over 190,000 views on TikTok because it really resonated with the community on the true hurt that we do experience, whether you're passable or not, whatever that looks like, there's still that element of trauma that goes there. And so there was that. And then just really also just sharing with the community that I was battling depression and anxiety and loneliness, battling those feelings of feeling like, am I as successful as I want to be? Am I liked? Do people like me? All of those things I think we as people do to ourselves. And so, like I tell people, pretty much what you see is what you get. If I'm happy, I'm definitely going to always express that and show that. But if I'm not, you'll pretty much see that as well. So I'm pretty much an open book when it comes to that. And but I just thank the community, especially our beautiful trans, gender non-binary, gender expansive, intersex community who has just loved on me and just continued to just be there and always uplift me. I am so incredibly thankful. I love you all so much.
Well, and we're getting a lot of love for you in the chat. I mean, it's been pretty constant, but we need more Mallery weekly. It says we need her. That's from Shy. So yeah, you're very loved here, and I really appreciate that. My community is a great one. We have a great group of people here. So yeah, I think you do fit in pretty darn well.
I'm happy. I'm happy to be part of the club.
What is your favorite thing that you've learned on your journey? Either about the world, about yourself?
I think one of the things I've learned about the world is that it will continue to bring you surprises. And you just have to continue to just go with those surprises, good and or bad. But just continue to go through with it. And then within myself, learning that I'm capable to continue to go through those life surprises, because sometimes, we as people could be like, this is just, too much, y'all. Like, for real, today's not the day. But again, being able to say, you know what, I'm resilient, I'm tenacious. All of those things continue to just push me forward. And that is one of the things I have learned on my journey is that I am tenacious.
Mm-hmm. And then as we close out this section, what is the advice that you have to pass to younger closeted trans folks out there?
It's going to be okay. It is going to be okay. I was 16, 2006. Some of you probably weren't even born yet. Sure. I'm just like, Lord, I realize y'all getting up there and I'm getting up there too. But I was that age and that time period where there was no YouTube of trans people being visible. It was very few, far in between. Don't give up. I knew that this day would come where our community slowly but surely would start to get more visibility and spaces and have these beautiful shows like this, thanks to Emily. So do not give up. Know that this is just the beginning to so much better. Continue to believe in yourself. Just know that you have people like myself and Emily and those who are here to love on you and be here for you.
Thank you so much for that. That was beautiful sentiment. And Mallery Jenna Robinson, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of your journey and being what you can for the community and for our community here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for having me.